Hello, my name is Evan Wright, solicitor and partner at JMW Solicitors, the Business Crime and Regulation Unit. We're asked for advice by corporate and individual clients in fraud investigations, fraud prosecutions. And this particular video deals with the area of deferred prosecution agreements, a relatively new concept in the UK, a relatively mature concept in the US. And I thought it'd be a good idea to ask Nick Johnson, a barrister from Exchange Chambers, to come and discuss the kind of issues and the typical kind of questions that are introduced when we first meet clients, to discuss what might become a deferred prosecution agreement in fraud investigations or anti-bribery and corruption investigations. Nick has represented in the case of Johnson & Johnson in the US and other fraud and anti-bribery inquiries both in the UK and abroad where these issues arise. Mr. Johnson, thank you very much for coming.
Not at all.
We're here to discuss deferred prosecution agreements.
Yes.
A very new concept in the UK, a fairly mature concept now in the US, and corporations, clients are still trying to get to grips with what they are, how they've come to be in this country, and what's been happening with them so far. Could you just give us a general description of what they are and where they come from?
Sure. Well, deferred prosecution agreement, obviously a criminal prosecution is deferred for a period, let's say 3 years, upon certain terms, and those terms can be very broad. They involve fines, they may involve remedial actions, cleaning up your corporate structure, carrying out investigations and assisting with investigations and that sort of thing. If you comply with those terms, the great advantage is no prosecution, even if there might be a prima facie case against you. So that's the major advantage of a deferred prosecution agreement. As you've said, that they've come over from America in many ways. They've had deferred prosecution agreements there against individuals for a long time, for many decades, and they're used widely in a corporate context as well. Key features, well, it is only at the moment for corporate investigation, so it's only a company that can face a deferred prosecution agreement, not individuals in the UK. They're going to be quite wide in scope. It will cover money laundering, it will cover fraud, it will cover proceeds of crime, and of course it will cover the recent UK Bribery Act, for example the Section 7 offence of corporate criminal liability, where you failed to take adequate procedures to prevent bribes occurring somewhere within your organisation. And so they're relatively wide potential for corporate enforcement. They're going to be at the prosecution invitation only. You can't pick up a phone and say to a prosecutor, please can I have one of these? And you're not immediately going to get disclosure either. So it's quite a new and nervous thing in some ways, because you're expected to self-investigate, self-report, tell the authorities something that perhaps they don't know. And even then, you may not get a deferred prosecution agreement. So those are the risks, but there are the potential upsides too.
Now, is this something that we're going to see on a weekly basis, deferred prosecution agreements being negotiated, or are we going to see one or two per year? Are there any industries that might be face a particularly high risk? Because of course we're right at the start. There hasn't been a deferred prosecution agreement yet. Although the prosecutions under the Bribery Act and other associated legislation have started to move over the recent times. Sentencing guidelines for corporations for corporate offences,
yes,
are now in the books. Codes of conduct are now have been issued. So many things are now in place, and the next step would be a consideration of a prosecution, with perhaps the end point being a deferred prosecution agreement.
Yes.
Is it too early to say how many there are going to be, or are we now in a position to say, well, we could expect one or two a year, or perhaps more?
Yes, a crystal ball question. Well, as you say rightly, it's only been in law for 3 months or so. Came in at the end of February of 2014. And as yet we've had no deferred prosecution agreement in this country. I suspect, guessing and moving forward, that the early ones will probably be in relation to larger corporations, particularly international companies with a UK office, with a UK aspect to them, which have been part of a wider multi-jurisdictional investigation. At the moment, for example, the SFO are actively investigating G4S, Serco, Rolls-Royce, all under the scope of bribery and corruption, and it may well be that one or other of those, who knows, may enter such a negotiation on that basis. The reason I say that is that, as we've said before, it's coming over from the States, and it's very much a corporate vehicle there, and also US investigators are far more experienced in using them, and therefore in conjunction with a prosecuting authority, whether that's the SFO or another one, they may together move forward on that basis. However, it would be foolhardy to think that these are not going to be widened out, and we've seen investigations, criminal investigations against much smaller companies, and I suspect that's therefore going to follow with deferred prosecution agreements for smaller companies. I'll give you an example: construction industry, hospitality, media, where you have third-party payments abroad, where you have marketing costs, where you have tendering and commissions, or hospitality or mergers. All these areas are potential areas for pitfalls in terms of either bribery or other alleged fraudulent activity, banking. All these sectors can involve much smaller companies, and there's going to be a trickle down. There's going to be this tool used, I suspect, as a means of bringing these companies into check. You're also going to get, therefore, as a result of that, subsidiaries also being pursued, and then individuals who, as we've said, are not currently available to get a deferred prosecution agreement, but also may face a prosecution as a result, and therefore need separate representation.
Okay. Well, in a separate item, we're going to move on to some other costs issues and what corporations might look out for,
Sure.
And the kind of advice they might need when facing the situation. But thank you very much.
Not at all.